A very good evening and welcome to this edition of The Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi, I'm your host. And tonight we'll be taking a look as we move towards 2015, the year expected to run and shape the politics of the country towards the 2016 elections. There are people who still believe the 2016 election will not or may not happen, but both the major political parties, the ruling National Resistance Movement, has set its dates for a national conference that will tell us in better detail or give us better projection of what 2015 will look like inside that party. The main opposition party, the Forum for Democratic Change, has also indicated it is pulling back its own National Delegates Conference to be able to determine how they move into 2015. To look at the broader political journey through the year 2015, we have, some people already call him a veteran political actor, former founding president of the Forum for Democratic Change, retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye. Very nice to have you, Doctor.
My pleasure, Charles, and a very good evening to all the viewers out there.
And of course, I have my colleague, Chris Obore, investigations editor at the Daily Monitor. Chris, always a pleasure to have you. I want to start with you, Doctor. You have watched and participated in the politics for quite a long time. It's been very exciting over the last few months. Of course, the other time that was extremely exciting was when you declared you're going to contest against President Museveni, starting with your own paper of what was going wrong within the National Resistance Movement in 2000. And then you declared you'd be running in the 2001 elections. We are seeing the great excitement coming out of the National Resistance Movement with the projected candidature of Amama Mbabazi. How fundamentally do you think this will change the political trajectory going into 2015, which will be a very active year?
Well, I don't think there will be that big fundamental difference regarding how this will play out from how previous engagements have played out. What you are experiencing now is indeed almost a replica of what happened in 2001, when I declared that I was going to challenge Mr. Museveni for leadership, because the difference at that time was that I was doing so from within the movement, and that had not happened. But what happened then has continued to happen. What happened then was that, first of all, Mr. Museveni was very panicky, quite openly. He sent out those missives, which were, very illuminating in terms of his mindset, which was he didn't really care what the law said. All he cared for was that he was not challenged. He said, in spite of a very clear constitutional framework, legal framework, that I was disruptive because I did not pass through the movement structures to be allowed to contest, when he clearly knew that it was an individual merit system where any person could come up without having to be cleared by anybody. And indeed, he went ahead and called a movement conference at this very place in the conference center, and that movement conference, we were, locked out.
When you say we were locked out, means you and
meaning who? Me and anybody who was perceived to be associated with me in the quest to have a challenge against him. We tried to actually take some documents inside there to express our own point of view, although we couldn't be there physically, and these were promptly confiscated and taken away. And so the thing was stage managed until a resolution was made urging him to be the candidate. In fact, they had wanted him to be declared the sole candidate in the very terms that they are trying to do so right now.
So you see a lot of parallels between...
It is exactly the same thing. And by the way, of course, following that, the struggle to remove that monopoly of the movement system, which they had tried to declare as a no-party state, was successful in the courts because of what they did. They offered all the ammunition that was needed to demonstrate that this was not a no-party but a one-party state, which sponsored candidates, which had structures, which was funding candidates. So all the evidence that was before the court demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that this was a one-party state, not a no-party state.
That is your challenge for 2001 after the elections.
Yes.
Now, a quick question to you. What parallels do you see between your own experience and Mbabazi's experience now?
Well, the monopoly of the process that is supposed to be within the organization of NRM, because you see what is happening now is that what Mbabazi is accused of, which is using his office as Secretary General to influence what goes on within the organization, is exactly what Mr. Museveni is doing. Because now as chairman, he doesn't consider that he is having an undue influence by appointing all the people to organize the conference, which is what he was begrudging Mbabazi as Secretary General to have been doing. So now he takes over the movement and organizes what will happen at the conference, appoints everybody that will control the conference, and it's supposed to give everybody in the movement an equal chance
to challenge
him.
Now, the difference between you and Mbabazi is that you declared you're going to run against Museveni. I don't know what pushed you to make the declaration at the time you did, but Mbabazi hasn't made a declaration. Why do you think he hasn't? And do you think this hurts his own chances, or he's possibly building this deliberately to be able to...
Well, I guess Mr. Mbabazi would be best prepared in a better position to answer that question, why he has not made his intentions very clear. But I would hazard to say that I believe it is to have a better fighting chance. Because you can see, even without declaring, in fact, not only not declaring, but saying he was not intending to contest. That's what he has said so far in the public. In the public, he has said he's not going to contest as long as Museveni is contesting. He signed the sole candidature resolution. But in spite of that, you can see what has been done to obliterate his presence within the organization that is supposed to be the movement, being hounded out of office of Prime Minister, being hounded out of office of Secretary General, being now almost locked out of the National Delegates Conference by appointing arbitrarily, quite obviously, those who will manage the conference, and all those who will manage being a very, very clear anti-Mbabazi fighters within the movement, some of whom have had personal and direct confrontation with him. Those are the ones who have been selected to manage the process. The process. So I think Mbabazi was trying to avoid that. I think he hoped that if he maintained some kind of a low profile and silence, that he could, somehow move on up to the delegates conference where he would declare his candidature, and that then he would be able to somehow get onto the ballot paper and contest for the...
So how does that impact, in your view, how does that impact his chances? Has he damaged his chances by playing it the way he has played it, or in a way, it gives him, keeping the mystery maybe help him to strike when not least expected?
Well, I guess it has a bit of advantages and disadvantages. If I was in his shoes, I would have come out very clearly. In fact, at Changwanzi, I would have opposed the sort of candidature thing directly. I would have then said, look, you cannot do this because some of us are actually interested. And even if he did not declare himself as an interested party, at least he would have stood in defense of democratic principles within the NRM as Secretary General of the party, in defense of all the other people who are in the party having their right to show interest and to have a fair chance of competing. I think I would have taken a different position. But as I have said, that also would attract its own disadvantages, but that's what I would have opted for. And the advantage in doing that, as far as I'm concerned, is that it gives those who want to support that platform, that position, clarity. And it gives them leadership. You say, no, we shall not accept this, and whoever feels as much as I do, let's now meet and see how to advance our own interests. But you've been seeing what has been happening is that even where there is no declaration has been made, but people are suspected of being Mbabazi supporters and they want to hold a meeting, and they are dispersed and arrested. And now Mbabazi is in a difficult situation of coming out to say,
to defend them.
To defend them. So
Let's bring Chris into this discussion. Chris, you play a very close watch of the politics, and you've been arguing. There are clear parallels that exist between Dr. Besigye's coming out in 2001 and Mbabazi, who hasn't actually declared what he plans to do. If you're looking at the political trajectory going forward, how is it shaping up, and the way it has been played so far, especially within the ruling party?
First, we are going into election period, and we should be careful to know that this period is going to be very disastrous to already a suffering population of Uganda. That the role of the state, which is already diminished in the well-being of individuals, is going to diminish further, because the resources are going to be geared toward political mobilization, and it will ignore the actual role of the state in improving the well-being of people, of citizens. So when you hear Nambole coming, the conference coming, just picture a mother who is giving birth as in need of government support. They will not get it. This is what I'm seeing so far in this period. It has come too early, perhaps because of Mbabazi's involvement. Then the other aspect is that you're trying to draw a parallel between Dr. Kizza Besigye, who is a phenomenon now, and Amama Mbabazi. One thing I want to clearly say and state is that there will never be another Besigye in NRM. Never. And I've kept repeating that. No, he cannot. He has blown the chance. There is a principle that Dr. Kareja taught us in the public policy class, the principle called the dirty hands dilemma in public management, where the state uses certain individuals to do very dirty things. And when they are doing it, the state actually supports them to do it, if it helps the state or individuals in the state to achieve what they want. But once that work is done, the state can again ignore you who was doing that. So it can even hand you over to the public, has the wrong one. So that dilemma there, and you cannot refuse to do it when the state wants you to do it. If you refuse, you see it become an enemy of the state. So when you are serving the state, you are always forced to do certain things that are in conflict with what the public desires. And the government will be protecting you. But when again the government realizes that the public is unhappy with what you're doing, the public sacrifices you. And that's where Mbabazi comes in.
Can we pick this up after a very short commercial break? Because I want to pick up on this dirty hands dilemma, yes, and how it draws the parallels. We'll be right back after a short break. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and our guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, founding president of the Opposition Forum for Democratic Change. Chris, just before we took the break, we were discussing, you're telling us about the dirty hands dilemma. And you say, this is an argument that has been raised, that in Mbabazi, I think you seated in this studio sometime back in another discussion on this, which some people believe has helped Mbabazi to remain in the news and dominate the news agenda for 10 months now. This is 11th month, and he's dominating the news agenda. He's making leading every news discussion. The question is, you touched a little bit about the challenge this portends for national service delivery. But the political question must be resolved before we can go into the others. And people will rise and say, we have Dr. Besigye, we are discussing with him now about the movement. I know we're going into discussing the FDC. The FDC house is not in order itself. It has issues that are emerging. The NRM house is not in order, it has issues. Where do you stand to demand and say, let there be service delivery?
No, we will come in, we will explain that perhaps, but what I was trying to say here, you see, Dr. Besigye is who he is, because either deliberately or unconsciously he avoided that hands dilemma. Because he was in the state. You know, he was a minister of state, you know, he was in the army, he headed logistics, in the UPDF, and that is an area where there is a very high temptation. When we talk about logistics, we are talking about procurement. You know how people want to work in the procurement department these days. You know how as a cause, procurement became the in thing. Because it's purely an avenue for people to enrich themselves. So basically escaped that hands dilemma. And it has been very difficult to find that thing that Besigye just done. They even tried to concoct a rep, concoct a letter of recommendation. There is nothing. So you cannot say of the same about Amama Mbabazi. I don't know much.
Until he was appointed, until Temangalo, he was known as Mr. Clean.
No. That is, you are talking now about actual deal making. I don't know much because Besigye knows better. This is an actor in this. The challenge against Museveni, even by his own comrades who were in the bush, did not begin today. It actually began climaxing in 2000. When there were meetings in the Bugolobi, I think maybe he knows them better. We are journalists, we just pick what we get from sources, that this man somebody else should take over. The Wapakabulos were there, the Amanya Mushegas were there, the Otafires were there, the Besigye were there. But then some people said, no, he's serving his last term. Making Besigye say, but why? That's when he came out and they accused him of jumping in the queue. So at that time, people say Amama Mbabazi, by 2000, was not a politician known in this country. If at all there was a time to replace Museveni at that time, Mbabazi was not a contender. Who knew him? He was a small name in NRM. Because the names like Mushega were so hounding. The Wapas were there. The Kotesas were there. The Jim Wages were the names. So others actually think Amama Mbabazi realized that he needed first to create a domain for himself. Before he could even challenge Museveni. So he, instead of creating it on the basis of comradeship, on the basis of working on ideals, on principles, Mbabazi traded that with the loyalty for Museveni. So in his trying to be loyal to Museveni, he began creating the graveyards I was telling you. Who is more powerful? Cut them off. Who else? Cut them off. Who else? Cut them off. Until now he felt like he had become the powerful man, a name Uganda knows. He begins to demonstrate the tendency now to want to challenge Museveni. But unfortunately, these people whom he hammered are still alive, most of them. And they're saying, no, but we're in this graveyard because of you. So that's another dilemma Mbabazi finds himself in. Even supporting the lifting of term limits, Mbabazi was at the forefront. It's not because he actually allowed Museveni to continue as a president. But he realized at that time, 2003, that if actually they lifted the term limits, and Museveni was to be replaced then, even Besigye was more powerful than him. Because Besigye was already a phenomenon. Mushega was known. Jim West was known. The Wapas were there. So he had, by default, to support term limits. He had to organize to buy time. He had to organize the yellow girls. The Hope Messages were the yellow girls. The Jackie Mbabazi were the ones. Now the Besigye were saying it is wrong to lift term limits. But for Mbabazi, lifting term limits then would have still confined him to political inferiority because they were already big names in NRM. Now that he has become a big name, he has again, other than Museveni to contend with, he has to contend with the ghosts from these political graveyards. So I find him in that dilemma.
Okay. We need to move this discussion, Dr. forward, but just before we move it forward, Chris raises something. When you started your planning, the people you're working with within the NRM, Mbabazi was obviously not one of them, was he?
No, he wasn't. And as I have explained many times before, I had never been considering at all to come into political leadership. We were only concerned about the direction the movement was taking. We were clear that the direction was wrong, that we were moving, veering off what our mission was, that we had failed to actually manage the transition, which was the main thrust of the purpose of the struggle, to organize a transition, a democratic transition. And we were failing. And so we were reviewing, we were reflecting on this and saying what needs to be done. And in that discussion, many people who are still in the movement were involved. As the discussion progressed, some of us who believed that the real solution in taking the struggle forward was to change leadership, started looking at those who could be leaders. And I was not one of them. I had my leaders whom I believed could offer that kind of leadership. Only that at the last minute, they
jumped off.
but Mbabazi wasn't one of them.
No, not at all.
Why?
Well, I think partly because, as you may know, earlier on he was mainly in security organizations, and as such, I think had a responsibility to the president that was not the same as we had. But I think also, as Chris says, I think he at the time did not consider it a priority on his own, I think in his own estimation, that there were problems that needed to be confronted, political problems that needed to be confronted. So this was really an engagement of those who were within the political arena and who were individually feeling that there was something that needed to be done. It was it was not an institutional kind of meeting saying we are meeting as historicals or as this. It was those who had like minds at the time that we are meeting.
Now, talking about transitions, you started a transition process in the party you founded, the Forum for Democratic Change. It elected a new leader in 2012. You gave way then. 2 years down the road, what we see is resignations of prominent people. The party hasn't been able to move on the way it had been expected, and people are saying, what role have you played to help the party move on and live without you? What kind of support have you given it? And some people believe that you haven't given the party enough support. You have actually more or less created a different power center that revolves around you and left the party to drown on its own.
Well, first of all, I must say that organizing a transition is not something exactly easy, and especially in a nascent, in a young institution like FDC. Don't forget that FDC was only formed in 2005, and therefore we are less than 10 years old as an institution. When I was leaving, we were 7 years old, and there is no history of or precedence of political organizations going through transitions like we had to manage. So the experience of managing a transition is fairly deficient in the country because political parties have not organized those kinds of transition. And this is where I think we take pride, because we formed FDC as a party that would offer the leadership in the country, not in terms of just the policies we are espousing, but in terms of democratic principles and how politics needs to be managed. And so when I decided to step aside, first of all, as you know, in our party, we have term limits. So we don't only believe in term limits in government, but we have term limits within the party. And I was serving a second term. So if I had not stepped down when I did, I would be stepping down just now. And one of my arguments was that I think it would be unfortunate to have a transition which is something new, not only within FDC but within the country, on the eve of an election. I thought it was necessary to have a transition early so that any complications that arise out of that transition, there is enough time to manage them. I think what has happened has indeed vindicated my decision then that it was necessary to have the transition early.
But people who look at FDC say that you continue to hover around the party, to overshadow the party itself.
In fact,
because
so the question you were asking was, how have I helped that transition?
Yes.
And helping the transition is double-edged, because first of all, you have a new leader who is a party leader and who needs to now make decisions for the party, take the party where he thinks it should go, you know, exercise his mandate as a party leader. And if the former leader then is trying to guide him how to move, that problem you are raising would be more justified. Saying, you know, you are no longer the party leader. Why are you now trying to influence what goes on in the party? And so in a measure, I try to avoid that, so that I give the new leader the room and space and opportunity to make decisions and to guide the party and to lead it in the manner in which he feels right to do so. At the time of handing over, I made it very clear to him and to all in the party that I am available should you need me for anything, to consult me on anything. I am available. Now, unfortunately, again, our party structure does not have a room for a former leader to participate within the structure. So I'm actually not a member of any of our party organs. I'm not a member of the delegates conference, or even in the delegates conference, I don't expect to be there. I'm not a member of the National Council. I'm not a member of the National Executive Committee. I'm not a member of any organ. I'm only a party member. And as I have said, I only availed myself to be consulted as and when those leading the party felt the necessity to do so.
But does it bother you when you have some members of the party who think they still owe you loyalty, and therefore they come to consult in Nangabo, and still some party members are supposed to be going to Najanankumbi to consult, and the party seems to be operating at two power centers, which is yourself, given your historical contribution to the party, and then the party leadership.
No, you see, first of all, I wouldn't mind anybody consulting me or feeling that they need to consult me. And when they consult me, whatever issue it is, I would only give them as much counsel as I think is necessary for the good of the party. But to suggest that there can be another power center within the party is certainly not realistic, because parties make decisions by organs. So as I have said, I do not sit in any of the organs of the party. So I cannot influence what an organ of the party decides, and it is the decision of the party organs that drive the party. So if the party decided that we are going, for example, like they have now done, and they did so without my involvement at all, that they are going to carry out a national mobilization, that they are going to rebuild the structures of their party, you know, these are decisions that are taken within the organs of the party that I do not see.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut it there because we need to take a quick break, and Chris needed to come in. Chris, can we pick this up after the break so that you start on, I know you follow FDC very closely, so you might have some questions for Dr. Besigye after a short break. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and welcome to this last segment. Our guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, founding president of the Forum for Democratic Change, and the first major name to break from the national resistance movement when he decided to contest against President Yoweri Museveni in the 2001 elections. Chris, you listened to Dr. Besigye, and we didn't have an opportunity for you to come in when we were discussing FDC in the last quarter. But if you look at the criticism that has been leveled within the FDC, the grumbling that has continued since Dr. Besigye gave way, do you think this makes FDC stronger as a party, or has it actually managed the transition, as Dr. Besigye says, that over the last 2 years, it has dealt with the transitional challenges, now it can be able to mount a significant challenge going into the 2016 elections?
First, let me try to scan the political environment, because everything should be interpreted in a context in which it operates. Biggest problem in our political life in this country is lack of a clear philosophy, a national philosophy, within which we decided to pursue our economics, pursue our political lives, pursue our leisure activities, we don't have that clear philosophy. And it is the duty of the state to build a citizenry towards a particular philosophy. We have discussed that thing over and over. So in the absence of that philosophy, what we are seeing now is disjointed activities. Everybody behaves the way they want to behave, and assuming that the way they are doing it is the best way to do it. So it just affects NRM, it affects UPC, it affects FDC, it affects any party. And what I'm seeing in Uganda today is there is clearly, because of that lack of a guiding philosophy, clearly there is bigger noise coming today from the young generation. And that noise ignores the old experiences and the old lessons. So the few who have the old lessons, old experiences are kept silent. And when a country behaves like that, you discover a country running without wisdom. So if there is... No, but we need to understand this. If we are running without wisdom, we are going to run with a lot of clutter. So we hear clutter in NRM, clutter in FDC, clutter in DP, clutter in UPC, all the time. So when you look at FDC now, Dr. Besigye, I may be right, I may be wrong. His leaving FDC was not entirely because he had fallen tired. He still has energy in him to cause a change. But this man, I may be right, I may be wrong, was fought within FDC. I know that. Many people felt, now he's getting donor money, he's a very rich man. Today, when he's off, they're saying the party has no money, the party is clearly showing you that even when they are fighting for change, for democratic principles, there are also tendencies for survival, individual interests. Now, the same Besigye who was eating donor money, who was spoiling the campaign, who is very angry, who is scaring away people from NRM from joining, now he's off there saying they have abandoned the party, there is no money, there is no... When you see clutter, there's a big problem. And the FDC's problem was, because as a country we have no clear philosophy, FDC was also tempted to go for quantity as opposed to quality. So, come, and actually they came. Now they have come without this philosophy, there's more trouble to address within before even challenge the one in power. So these are all issues affecting, coming from the way we have been governed. We have been tuned to pursue that which benefits us first before we think about which benefits us in aggregate.
Actually, I thought the national philosophy, he was going to take it in a different direction. Because one of the things that you must really appreciate that affects what are described as political parties today in Uganda is the whole environment in which political parties are supposed to function. This whole thing of saying there is a multi-party dispensation in Uganda, I have said over and over, it's a myth. There is no multi-party political dispensation. The one-party state which I was talking about earlier, which I tried to break through in 1999-2000, is still the status quo that that we are dealing with, that one-party state meant that the NRM, which took the state, became one and the same with the state. Mm-hmm. And all NRM institutions became state institutions.
Or all state institutions became NRM institutions?
And vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that has not changed. Even when in law we said there was a transition to a multi-party dispensation. And what happened, in fact, is what Mr. Museveni was saying in 2005 during that referendum. You remember he was saying the whole purpose of the referendum was not to go to a multi-party dispensation, but to remove those who did not want to stay with them in the movement. Kubejako. And that is what has happened. So these parties are those who kubejako, who left the state, the NRM state. The NRM state remained intact. And the NRM state, what happened was that it was no longer actually managed by the NRM organization that had taken over the state. It increasingly became a one-man state. NRM was also hijacked by Mr. Museveni. So and this is what we are dealing with. So when you see political parties, not functioning, it is because they cannot function under a policing system of Mr. Kayihura, who is a functionary of NRM.
But the question would be, Doctor, that
who will not allow these units or these entities that are trying to grow outside the state to take over the state. Any entity outside the state trying to take over the state is in fact seen and ideologically by them as an inimical entity trying to overthrow.
And therefore it must be,
yes,
must be defeated.
Yes, and they actually talked about in those terms that they are subversive. They are trying.
But you see, Doctor, that is a very important point. We are not disagreeing with that. But you see, Mr. Museveni has been so careful and calculated in whatever he's doing. His is about him being in power. And he will do everything to be in power. He does not, I don't even imagine he can stay for a week without being called His Excellency. So he must struggle to remain His Excellency. But that does not absolve other actors who see that wrong in him. It is very clear, even when the environment is so illiberal, because our democracy is illiberal democracy. You're free but not free. And that one is clear, everybody knows that. But even certain actors within our parties, whether in UPC or FDC, have not left the tendencies that they are fighting from NRM. You will find that the money for bicycles for FDC to give mobilizers has gone away. You will find in UPC, donors brought money, it was not accounted. Surely that one cannot be a Museveni problem. So you find that it becomes now contextual. That we don't, even those who professed FDC for as long as it was a vehicle to send them to parliament, to send them into councillorship, to send them. So the whole purpose of leadership is even lost, even from within the opposition. So we have to address this problem from all those corners. That if we got Mr. Museveni off, Mr. Besigye will have a very big challenge to reorient even the people he has been dealing with. And Mr. Muntu will have a problem to reorganize the people he's dealing with. So you see now, Mbabazi is facing problems in the NRM. But I could see his mistakes. He believed in his own system. But the blow coming to Mbabazi is going to come from the NRM MPs. The people he ignored in Chankwazi. These were leaders. These are the people Museveni is going to get hold of. Because these leaders, their principle is, do I maintain my domain? Do I maintain my packs coming? And now Museveni is going to give them the packs. The MPs are going to give Mbabazi a very big blow politically. Okay. But yet he didn't see it coming. Yes. If he saw their interest, he would have understood from Chankwazi, things had changed.
Yes, criticizing the NRM is something we have discussed several times. In interviews I've done with you, discussed several times. Does that take away the responsibility of these entities that Chris is talking about that have decided to operate from outside, to be able to build themselves internally, to make sure that they can be able to mount a reasonable challenge?
No, it doesn't take away the responsibility. All it does is that it makes their responsibility, those exercising that responsibility, extremely difficult. As I have said, first of all, to function as entities, you need some level of freedom. You need some level of resources that can allow you to have meetings, that can, the point he was talking about, of parties that are, you know, so strangled in terms of resources that they cannot move. And you need, you need some kind of permanent staff in the parties. Somebody must pay them. You need some offices where they can, basic things that these parties cannot do with. And what results therefore is that those functioning from those entities, quite many of them, the point he was making, become compromised because they cannot see how they achieve what they are trying to achieve within the means that are there. Those who are making it impossible for them to do so will find ways of compromising. So you find many of the people within the parties actually compromise. They are fifth columnists of the NRM. And that is why, you know, looking at this as a multi-party dispensation and the challenges of FDC, UPC, DP as challenges of opposition parties as opposed to a ruling party is missing the point. This is why I have been advocating, and controversially even within the opposition, that we will need a transitional mechanism, a transitional period when where we must restructure the state, where non-state entities like political parties will have the opportunity to be organized and built, and where
we're running short on time. We have about 4 minutes to get out of here. So,
will you hear from the leader of opposition now, Mr. Wafula, whom I call a pure Catholic? I don't know, he's misplaced in politics. He made a statement how corrupt Parliament is. The UPC, the FDC, the DP have been given accountability committees in the Parliament. But what do we hear as journalists? The most corrupt committees are headed by the opposition. That challenge puts a dilemma to the neutrals. What do you do? I mean, you are accusing NRM of pilfering public resources, causing a hemorrhage in the State House. The same hemorrhage they are condemning on the camera is the hemorrhage they are condoning in silence. In the park, in the Kosase, there are so many of those accountability committees. If the performance of opposition cannot be evaluated properly in the Parliament, you cause people to begin to worry these people are pages of NRM.
But you see, Chris, those on the opposition are not functioning in some kind of a vacuum. In order to be elected to come to this Parliament, one now needs something like 300 or more million shillings. You cannot be elected to Parliament if you have less than 300 million shillings.
Should we participate in the election?
So that is the question. Now, so even these people who are in Parliament, the only way they will come back to Parliament is to be corrupt. Whether they are on the opposition, whether they are in the government. And that is why, even within FDC, we have had bitter quarrels over the 20 million that was given, you know, to MPs as a bribe. And you had, you know, people in the opposition saying, no, we are entitled to that money. If we take it back, they are going to steal it anyway. So we better, since we already have it, this 110 million, which has just been paid to MPs, it is now public knowledge that quite a number or many on the opposition have also taken it. So this is why it's really misleading to talk about opposition parties, government party, because both don't exist in the current environment.
But how do you resolve that? Because
in the current environment, this is why the struggle now must be a struggle for liberation. And that's why, for me, even part of the reason indeed I stepped out of FDC was because I realized that we need a different struggle. We need a struggle for liberation so that those, whether they are in NRM, whether they are in DP, FDC, who want a different type of Uganda, we rally together and liberate the state of capture by the, initially by NRM and eventually by Mr. Museveni, and restructure the state so that we have independent, competent state institutions and that we can now restructure and build non-state institutions that are actually functional, political parties that are functional, civil society organizations that are functional. We don't have a civil society. So we need to liberate the state, restructure it, and then have free and fair elections that can lead
Talking about that, in the last 4 minutes of this discussion, there's been a big discussion about your personal AD, Sam Mugumya. He was apparently captured in Beni, in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Officially from the military and from the police, we're being told that he was there to try and mobilize for rebellion against the government and picking up an organization for which you have actually been tried, which is the People's Redemption Army, PRA. What do you know about Sam Mugumya's, how did he end up in Congo? Did you send him there?
Well, what I know
is that the alternative you're trying to talk about?
What I know is pretty much what has been said by those government institutions. Some of them, of course, have been conflicting with each other. We all have heard that he was in Congo and that he is in the hands of the DRC military, though the Ugandan military tells us exactly what he is confessing. If he's not in their hands, I don't know how they get to know that he has confessed that he is in Congo to organize rebellion and that he is trying to link up with the PRA and so on and so forth. This is what the Ugandan military has said. Of course, the statements of Pade Ankunda, Colonel Pade Ankunda, were very revealing and concerning to me because he made a statement that Mugumya's days are over and that finally we have got him. Mm-hmm. Now these are very, very serious statements because he must know how his days have become over. Saying finally we got him suggests that maybe he has been on the run or they have been hunting for him and finally they have got him. But having said all that, I think it is extremely worrying that the government of Uganda is not telling Ugandans, certainly the family of Mr. Mugumya and all those who care for him, what it is doing to secure his return to Uganda if he was arrested elsewhere. In any case, to make sure that he is safe and that his rights are protected wherever he is. This is a fundamental responsibility of the state.
But people who are looking, yes, people who know Mugumya and know how he has been close to you over the years and his loyalty to you would be saying you have a responsibility to say, how did Mugumya live when we had been working very closely together? Where did he end up? Maybe did I know or didn't I know what he went to do and what his safety is?
Well, first of all, I must say that yes, Mugumya is indeed one of the people I have worked with very, very closely. He is not my employee. We are activists together. And I am aware that he has been having challenges, especially over the last 3 months, because his brother, who was actually more responsible, taking charge of their family, passed away in a tragic road accident and, left a young wife of 1 year and a young child. And Mugumya has been now trying to reorganize the family and has been moving back and forth to his home in Rukunjiri. And I was aware that he was in Rukunjiri about 3 weeks ago. I do not know how he would have ended up in Congo, whether he was captured in Rukunjiri and taken to Congo, whether he had gone to Congo for any reason, which would be nothing abnormal because Rukunjiri borders Congo. People in Rukunjiri are always moving across to Congo and coming back. I will only know this if I am able to talk to Mr. Mugumya. But having said that, don't forget that Mr. Mugumya has, while in Uganda, been arrested and charged with treason, together with some other people. He spent more than 2 years as a prisoner on treason charges. He was eventually acquitted without any iota of evidence being produced in court. Mr. Mugumya has similarly been arrested and tortured over many, many times during our political struggles. Therefore, what is clear and not deniable by anybody that Mugumya has been one of those who have been intensely persecuted by the state. And this kind of persecution tends to take turns that are familiar towards the elections. You remember that towards the other election, that's when I was charged with treason, with terrorism, with illegal possession of guns, and so on and so forth. I would not be surprised if what is happening now is again another, and that PRA that it is now surfacing again, you know, after it had been buried with the release of all those 23 people whom I was charged with.
I'm afraid our time is out. We need to get out of here.
I think this is simply part of this well-known political persecution.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid, Chris, our time is out.
Because it has no government there.
We're being told that we need to get out of here. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Dr. Besigye. Thank you very much to you all our viewers for joining us tonight. Do join us again next Sunday for yet another exciting discussion right here on The Fourth Estate. Have a good night.